It is a pleasure to be back virtually with you all at St. Mark's. Um, uh, Amy, thank you for the invitation. And it kind of providentially, if you like, coincides with Metallica's presence in the country. They're currently touring. So I'll be seeing them in a couple of weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, and there are a few things in this. For example, at some point in the presentation, I'll be subjecting you all to a 30-year-old music video of theirs, the Until It Sleeps music video. So just a bit of a, I was going to give like a bit of a trigger warning to say that, you know, there's some confronting spiritual imagery within it that serves the purpose of the paper. And when I flagged that with Bernard and said, what do you think? He said, you tell them that you have my blessing, because Bernard told me that it can't be anything more, let's say, scandalous than what I've addressed. So we know that these things are for our mutual edification, whatever Bernard and I address in our kind of interests. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the paper and share it all with you. This paper analyzes the theological themes and images deployed in Metallica's 1996 music video for the song Until It Sleeps, which addresses the deeply personal topic of the struggle against an internal foe. This paper argues that the conventional assessment of the latter as referring to the cancer that took the lives of the parents of James Hetfield, the frontman and main lyricist of the band, should also be viewed in light of the music video's use of imagery from the paintings of Renaissance artist Hieronymus Bosch, specifically the Haywain triptych, Ecce Homo, and the Garden of Earthly Delights. When read in light of the Christian themes inspired by this imagery, the song's lyrics point instead to an internal struggle against temptation and the evil that inspires it, what in this paper I define in a manner consistent with, I guess you could say, Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox ascetical literature as the Passions. I argue that this reading of Until It Sleeps is confirmed by the diachronic references to similar themes in song lyrics throughout the band's 44-year tenure, as they reflect the upbringing and meaningful personal struggles of Hetfield expressed in artistic form. So on the 1st of March 2023, the internationally renowned heavy metal band Metallica, which has been active since 1981, has dropped the third track from their album 72 Seasons. It is entitled If Darkness Had a Sun, and so far has 12 million views on YouTube. I'm not going to play this particular song, but I will read the lyrics out to you. Please just pay attention to what might sound like emphatically or even, subconscious Christian themes, okay? So temptation 4 times is exclaimed at the beginning of the song. The beast still shouts for what it's yearning. He stokes the fire, desire burning. The never-ending, quenchless craving, the unforgiven misbehaving. If darkness had a son, here I am. Temptation is his father. If darkness had a son, here I am. I bathe in holy water. Temptation, leave me be. And then again, it's temptation 4 times. So paint your eyes as black as sorrow. Hide yourself behind tomorrow. The nightmares search for infiltration in domination, captivation. And then it's again the chorus. If darkness had a son, here I am. Temptation is his father. If darkness had a son, here I am. I bathe in holy water. Temptation, leave me be. The last verse. Return again to where it's darkest, dragging home this heathen harvest, and all the children subjugated, manipulated, propagated. If darkness had a son, temptation, leave me be. The lead singer and rhythm guitarist of the band, James Hetfield, is accredited for writing this track alongside drummer and longtime creative collaborator Lars Ulrich and lead soloist Kirk Hammett. The lyrics, however, are characteristically Hetfield's. While present in the earlier records, the theme of struggling against temptation has been a staple of his songwriting since the mid-1990s. This is when his lyrics took on a more existential tone from the work on their previous albums. The latter dealt in their own way with despair, loss, and angst. Songs like Fade to Black, Sanitarium, One, and Dyer's Eve are examples. But they also addressed characteristically metal themes like war in songs like For Whom the Bell Tolls, Disposable Heroes, Don't Tread on Me, and apocalyptic motifs, The Four Horsemen. In short, anything that pertained to the genres of
military, horror, and fantasy storytelling that could be discerned in the respective oeuvres of the band's predecessors, like Black Sabbath, there they are on the right at the top, Iron Maiden, and Diamond Head. The latter two belong to the famous new wave of British heavy metal, which so decisively influenced the genre pioneered by Metallica, namely thrash metal. Hetfield's life has been affected by two very tragic losses. The first was that of his mother Cynthia, née Bassett, in February 1980, several years after her divorce from Hetfield's father. Both parents were strict Christian Scientists. In other words, they belonged to the Church of Christ Scientists that was founded in the 19th century in New England, USA by Mary Baker Eddy, and whose beliefs can be characterized as opposition to any form of medical intervention to heal illness. As a result of their adherence to Christian Scientism, Hetfield's mother succumbed to cancer when James was only 16. He went on to form Metallica a year later with drummer Ulrich and lead guitarist Dave Mustaine, who would later go on to form the band Megadeth, eventually discovering the quintessential bass player in Cliff Burton on the left there pictured. But Cliff perished in a bus accident during the band's tour for their third album released in 1986, Master of Puppets. The best, right? This is like Metallica, peak Metallica. He was replaced by Jason Newsted in the late 1980s, and Jason remained with the band through to the early 2000s, and their current bass player is Rob Trujillo. The death of Cliff took a terrible toll on the band, hitting James the hardest. Their follow up to Master of Puppets, 1988's And Justice for All, was their darkest and heaviest album. In 1991, it was followed by their commercially successful self titled album, dubbed the Black Album because of its dark cover, that sold millions of copies worldwide. And this is the one that, most people know it because it was such a massive phenomenon. Nothing Else Matters, Enter Sandman, all those great tracks appear on this album. After years of touring, the band returned to the studio in the mid 90s to produce their heavy rock and blues album, Load, which, while not as commercially successful as their previous offering, still topped the charts and heralded the beginning of their more, I would call it, personal or existential phase. Hetfield's lyrics have since then dealt with themes involving the pain and sorrow caused by giving in to one's desires, what we would call in Christian parlance the passions, and to the temptations that exacerbate these. As can be seen above, well, as I mentioned above, in the lyrics of If Darkness Had a Sun, Hetfield exclaims temptation 4 times as if to underscore its unyielding presence. The first verse is self referential. He describes himself as a beast shouting for what it yearns. He uses the language of fire and burning to describe his desire, which cannot be satiated as it is a never ending, quenchless craving. For the misbehavior this beast causes, he remains unforgiven, a title given to no less than 3 Metallica songs, recorded over a 20-year period of the band's 44-year history. The Unforgiven in 1991 on the Black Album, Unforgiven 2 in 1997, and even the Unforgiven 3 in 2008. These are all essentially Christian themes, remnants of Hetfield's upbringing that he struggled to integrate because of the hardships Christian Scientism, which is rather fundamentalist, caused him, along with the death of his mother as a result of those hardships. Hetfield's references to positive aspects of Christianity, like forgiveness, are referred to, yet they cannot be actualized. Only temptation leading to burning desire prevails. The chorus is telling, if darkness had a son, here I am, temptation is his father, and ending with temptation, leave me be. Here there is an identification of temptation and the burning desire it incites with darkness, with Hetfield construing himself as darkness's son. But this is not what he truly wants. His desire is not to be afflicted by the quenchless craving, but to bathe in holy water. Holy water is in fact blessed by clergy in traditional Christian churches to drive away the demons that cause temptation and to become a repository of the presence of the grace of the Holy Spirit, of God Himself. One usually dips their fingers into holy water before crossing themselves as they enter a Roman Catholic church, or is blessed with this water by clergy during the Roman Catholic Feast of Pentecost. In Orthodox Christian churches, on the Feast of the Theophany on the 6th of January, which commemorates the baptism of Christ in the Jordan River, holy water is sprinkled on the congregation and subsequently in the homes of the faithful after the cross is thrown into the ocean or a body of water. as is happening here. It is precisely the grace offered by holy water that Christians believe assists in overcoming temptation. Hetfield seeks this so profoundly that he wishes to bathe in this water. Finally, he shouts, "Temptation, leave me be." Subsequent verses address similar themes, with temptation equated with nightmares searching for infiltration and a return to a heathen harvest, evocative images of the self-indulgence that temptation brings. This track, If Darkness Had a Sun, was released just after Christians belonging to the Roman Catholic, Orthodox, and High Anglican or Protestant churches celebrated the first Sunday of Lent. This is a period marked by increased fasting from the objects of desire, the latter comprising various passions, hunger, etc., in order to overcome temptation, in imitation of Christ's resistance to the devil's temptations in the wilderness, as we see in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, celebrated on the same first Sunday of Lent in the Catholic tradition. The seeming coincidence of the period in which the song was released, namely during Lent, prompts one to ponder whether this was done deliberately. Indeed, Metallica had already released two other singles from their 72 Seasons album, Lux Eterna and Screaming Suicide, in November 2022 and February 2023, respectively, which was not scheduled for its debut in full until the 14th of April, 5 days after Easter 2023. Neither of these other songs can be considered thematically linked to Lent, however. So let's look at Christian approaches to temptation, passions, and sin. As mentioned, Christians believe they are called to put up a resistance against temptation during Lent so that the passions might be overcome. It is worth exploring the theological reasons for this undertaking. The Christian testimony, especially found in the ascetical literature of Western and Byzantine Christendom, is that all human beings struggle with their passions. The passions are the natural desires that can overwhelm people when they become attached to objects that stimulate these. This in turn inflates the ego and selfishness to a person's own detriment and to the detriment of others. The passions, from the Greek word pathi, are thus something that people suffer or that causes others to suffer. The patristic tradition, those writings by figures venerated as fathers or saints, interpreted these passions as exacerbated by demonic temptation and as leading to sin. According to this patristic tradition, the paradox is that the passions are part of the body-soul makeup that, when properly oriented, assist the human being's progress on the journey towards God. For example, anger against sin is a good thing, and properly oriented lust can be tempered as love that leads to desire for God. But the corruption of the passions by the fall, as we see in Genesis chapters 2 and 3, and I explore it a bit below, means that without God's help, the passions are almost always directed by our fallen will to be self-seeking and oriented. This leads to idolatry of the creature, the me or the I, over and against the Creator and other people. For when the I indiscriminately indulges its passions at the expense of neighbor, the person cannot possibly accommodate in a loving and self-sacrificial way those for whom Jesus also died on the cross, namely everybody, to say nothing of God himself. To reiterate, the passions are natural and a part of God's design. The problem is not with the experience of pleasure that they afford, but with their indiscriminate and selfish abuse. Part of the Christian journey, then, involves actively struggling against the passions with God's help so as to conform to the image and likeness of his Son, Jesus. By carrying the cross of the passions in imitation of Jesus carrying his literal cross to Calvary, for according to some church fathers, as the divine Son of God the Father, Jesus' passions that belong to his human nature were always properly oriented and he was thus without sin. This struggle is meant to lead people away from selfishness towards selflessness, from love of self to love of God and neighbor. For as stated by Christ in Matthew's Gospel, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now, there are those within Christianity that face the passions, and there are those who don't. There are those outside Christianity who don't face the passions, and there are those in other religious traditions that do. We're not going to lionize the Christian faith as the only solution to the passions, although that ultimate solution is in Jesus. But it is striking to find in Metallica's lyrics attempts to address these issues by using language that is emphatically Christian. Given what we have already said about Hetfield's teenage trauma at losing his mother and later his friend Cliff, it makes sense that his first explicit engagement with these themes began around the time of the Lowered era when the songwriter reached his mid-30s. And there has been no dearth of such content since then. The first single from Metallica's 2026 album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, was entitled Halo on Fire. The image of the halo was appropriated by the earliest Christians from pagan representations of the sun god to signify that, in the first instance, Jesus Christ, and in the second, his saints, are holy, and thereby to shift the emphasis away from solar worship to worship of Jesus and veneration of the saints. But here Hetfield inverts its significance with the chorus. Halo on fire, the midnight knows it well. Fast is desire, creates another hell. I fear to turn out the light, for the darkness won't go away. Fast is desire, turn out the light, halo on fire. It's a great song. That we are weakest at night, that this is the time when desire can quickly overwhelm us to create another hell, resonates with patristic approaches towards the passions, that we are more susceptible to in the evenings when the body and mind are weak. In other words, when we can put up less of a fight. That insatiable desire, when not properly directed but misdirected by passionate attachment, engenders hell, is a very astute spiritual and psychological observation by him. He relates this hell to a burning halo, but a nuance that is missed here is that fire also has positive connotations in the Christian tradition. According to the mystical traditions of Catholicism and Orthodoxy, the charism of the burning heart is said to be experienced by those within whom the Holy Spirit dwells emphatically, leading, in the case of the saints, to an experience of God as transcendent fire and light. This is described as the beatific vision in Catholicism or the Taboric light in Orthodoxy. The halos of the saints are on fire indeed, but this is a positive experience of salvation, of eternal life. Hell, in these mystical strands of church tradition, is that same fire, only experienced differently, inducing pain and torment. It is the result of not overcoming the passions in this life. In other words, without God's assistance. Okay, so now we're going to look at Until It Sleeps and Hieronymus Bosch, and we're just going to watch the video from beginning to end. Is everyone okay on that end to watch the video? Maybe if you're all together at St. Mark's, just watch it on the main screen so that you don't get reverb or anything like that, or mute your laptops. Just a suggestion, it might help. Okay, so I'm going to play it now.
So you're all able to see that? You saw it? Has anybody heard the song before? No? Okay. It's Metallica's middle era there, you know. Some people either love it or hate it if they're Metallica fans. I love this song. I'm going to just break it down for you. All of the imagery that you saw there is taken from Hieronymus Bosch. So it's phenomenal, I think, and I'll take you through. The most stunning engagement with these themes, reflecting Hetfield's own inner struggle, is Until It Sleeps, the lead single from the Load album. Those of you who had the lyrics in the seminar room, for the sake of those who don't have them online, I'll just read them out very briefly. Where do I take this pain of mine? I run, but it stays right by my side. So tear me open, pour me out. There's things inside that scream and shout, and the pain still hates me. So hold me until it sleeps. Just like the curse, just like the stray, you feed it once and now it stays. And again, so tear me open, but beware, there's things inside without a care, and the dirt still stains me, so wash me till I'm clean. The post-chorus is, it grips you, so hold me. It stains you, so hold me. It hates you, so hold me. It holds you, so hold me until it sleeps. Second verse, so tell me why you've chosen me. I don't want your grip, don't want your greed. I'll tear me open, make you gone. No more can you hurt anyone. And the fear still shakes me, so hold me until it sleeps. And then there's this whole thing in the post-chorus. It grips you, so hold me. It stains you, so hold me until it sleeps. I don't want it, no. And the final chorus, so tear me open, but beware, there's things inside without a care, and the dirt still stains me, so wash me till I'm clean. I'll tear me open, make you gone, no more can you hurt anyone, and the fear still shakes me, so hold me until it sleeps. These powerful lyrics are made even more emphatic in the context of the music video for the song. The video was produced by Samuel Bayer, an award-winning cinematographer and commercial and video director, whose credits include Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, Ozzy Osbourne's Mama, I'm Coming Home, as well as music videos for Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones, the Cranberries, Green Day, David Bowie. I'm betraying my age a bit here as well, and Iron Maiden, to name only a few. Also,
Very similar lighting you'll see in film clips by Faith No More in this period, and REM. Utilizing yellow lighting and dark tones, Bayer's videos are marked by particular style typical of the melancholic aesthetic of the music of the 1990s, influenced as it was by the grunge movement that came out of Seattle, Washington State in the late 80s. The video for Until It Sleeps, which premiered on MTV on the 21st of May, 1996, won the Best Hard Rock Video Award at the 1996 MTV Music Awards. What is striking about the video is that it integrates the band members into dramatizations inspired by the paintings of the Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch. Born in Brabant in the Middle Renaissance, little is known of Bosch's life except that he came from a family of painters, that he was married to one, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, Aleid Goyerts van den Meerven, circa 1480, and that he died in 1516. A Roman Catholic funeral mass was held for him in a church dedicated to St. John on the 9th of August that year. Obviously, Bayer saw something in the lyrical composition of Until It Sleeps that he felt could be overlaid with imagery taken from and inspired by Bosch's paintings that are in turn inspired by scenes from the Old and New Testaments of the Bible. The three paintings that influence the video include the fall of Adam and Eve, taking place on the left panel there, from Paradisal Eden, which is depicted in the Hieronymus triptych, completed in 1516, the year of Bosch's death. The second, Ecce Homo, behold the man, which refers to the words uttered by the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, as he exhibited the semi-naked and scourged Christ to the people of Israel. In the painting, these words appear in the I think they appear up here, Ecce Homo, next to Pilate's face, as a sort of speech bubble to which the crowd responds, crucify him or crucifige eum, which is here. In the image, one can see that this is actually written in the space between the crowd and the elevated figures, Jesus and Pilate. Pilate is wearing a triangular red hat, and that's his coterie there. The third image from the Garden of Earthly Delights is the Garden of Earthly Delights. And what you see principally in the film clip is the human-eating monster from the third panel, which depicts hell. And, you know, I'm quite struck by Bosch's paintings. They are like surrealist before surrealism. I reckon David Lynch would have a feast interpreting this stuff. So, as in the panel, the monster that's in the film clip is seen in the music video consuming humans whole, but in the painting here on the right, it excretes the people it devours into a bowl at the base of its golden throne. This creature has often been referred to as the Prince of Hell by Bosch's interpreters, and all three are oil paintings using various pigments on oak, wood, and panels. The very first scene of the music video shows a bright red apple from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with a serpent curling around its branch. In Genesis chapter 2, when Adam was created by God and placed in the Garden of Eden, the only ordinance given to him was not to partake of the fruit of this tree, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die, Genesis 2, verse 17. Eve is created after Adam, and presumably the ordinance applied to her also. This image is, of course, inspired by the left-hand panel of the Hieronymus triptych. Here's Adam and Eve over here. This is in the Garden of Earthly Delights. So if you go back, here, this is the left-hand panel of the Hieronymus triptych. So he returns to this theme often, Bosch. The video moves between the image of the tree of knowledge, which has the face of a woman. Oh, so there's a close-up of the Prince of Hell for you, just to see. It appears in the film clip. So the video moves between the image of the tree of knowledge with the woman's face, and characters inspired by the crowd that jeers at Christ in Ecce Homo. These include a man with a crown, a bearded individual that looks like Pilate, wearing a red hat, and a hooded man with one eye. A large fish drops into a sumptuous fruit-laden bowl held by the hooded man, indicating decadence. Flashing between these scenes and the band's drummer, who is also dressed pompously with a feathered scarf, yet obviously in a state of suffering, the song's intro begins with Hetfield, his eyes closed and head raised, singing, "Where do I take this pain of mine?" A crucifix is clearly shown above his head, which is emblematic of pain. It is embedded into a large back panel with a curved middle section, and on the squared sides on the left and right of the panel are two lit candles, and beneath them two human skulls symbolizing death. More figures from Ecce Homo are shown as the lead singer continues, "I run, but it stays right by my side." And drummer Ulrich and lead guitarist Hammett are shown in states of pain and agitation. As the heavy chorus begins, bass player Newstead is shown thrashing about in the dirt at the base of the panel, marked with the crucifix, as Hetfield uses dramatic hand gestures to push away that which haunts him. "So tear me open, pour me out, there's things inside that scream and shout, and the pain still hates me, so hold me until it sleeps." The lyrics intimate possession by entities that scream and shout within, demons, causing a pain that hates the vocalist, whose desire is nevertheless to be held until it sleeps. The "it" here has been interpreted as the cancer that tragically took not only Hetfield's mother's life, but also his father's in 1996, the same year Load was released. But a literal interpretation of the music video, which features the snake from the Garden of Eden, a golden serpent woman, and girls dressed as red devils, not to mention the Prince of Hell that we saw, yields a far more sinister result, that it is the devil and his demons that are causing this hate-induced pain. This is amenable with the Christian teaching that the devil, or Satan, originally an archangel, fell from his place in heaven because of his jealousy and hatred of human beings. He is the one who tempts people to sin via the passions and misdirected will. There is brief respite as the chorus ends and Newstead is now shown laying prone on the ground, with Hammett tied to a cross inscribed on its inverse bar with the Latin words "Vexo crucio sui iactantia" or lactantia, which has no suitable translation into English, something to do with the vexing of the cross and boasting. As the next verse begins, Hetfield is seated on a throne encircled by thorned vines. A woman in the form of a golden serpent is shown, who will later gesticulate and demonstrate affliction during the next chorus. The serpent is, of course, associated by Christians with the devil, and it appears at the beginning of the music video slithering on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 to 7 depicts the serpent tempting Eve to disobey the commandment not to eat from the tree's fruit, beguiling her by insinuating that God had lied, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:5. This imagery will later be taken up by the video, but it will depict Eve tempted by a zoanthropomorphic devil, which has a human body and the head of a donkey, symbolizing the folly of Satan because of the donkey's ancient association with stubbornness. At this juncture, Hetfield sings, "Just like the curse, just like the stray, you feed it once and now it stays." This can be interpreted in the light of Christian teaching on the passions. When the objects of desire are fed by passionate attachment, which can involve either thinking about them or acting them out, they become reality, they stay. According to patristic interpreters, there are varying degrees of severity here. But when one enters into a dalliance with a thought that will inevitably cause pain to the self and to others, we have the beginnings of what Christians describe as sinful behavior that can become an addiction if acted out. The serpent woman in the video is herself writhing in the dirt, which stains like sin, and which in Genesis chapter 3, verse 14 is the proper place for the devil, since as God says, after he discovers his beguiling of Adam and Eve, "Cursed are you above all livestock, you will crawl on your belly and eat dust." This is obviously not to be interpreted as God literally cursing snakes, but the former archangel who is made earthbound by his insidious behavior. Look at Paul's reference to Satan's kingdom as in the air, which causes people to gratify the cravings of our flesh and following desires and thoughts, Ephesians 2:3. As the second chorus unfolds in Bayer's video, Hetfield suffers on his vine-laden throne, his thorned throne, as a symbol of pride, while a reddish tree woman leaves marks on the body of the pompously decked Ulrich, and Newstead, now out of the dirt, wipes mud all over his arms, face, and torso. These are very powerful images that, when considered in conjunction with the lyrics, become poignant. "So tear me open, but beware. There's things inside without a care, and the dirt still stains me, so wash me until I'm clean." Hetfield acknowledges the inner passions exacerbated in the video by devils and demons, and that he's still stained, see Newstead's muddy body, and trapped by pride, like the thorny throne. His desire is to be washed clean, as he acknowledges that the passions also affect his neighbor. "It grips you, so hold me." It stains you, so hold me. It hates you, so hold me. It holds you, so hold me until it sleeps. Another problem with the passions is that they cause a domino effect that can only be overcome by a genuine change of heart. In other words, repentance, asceticism, and love of neighbor. Otherwise, the cycle of the passions, from pleasure to pain and back again, causing even more pain, will inevitably continue. All that can be hoped for is to be held until they sleep. The second verse initiates the most potent biblical imagery in the song. So tell me why you've chosen me. Don't want your grip, don't want your greed. I'll tear me open, make you gone. No more can you hurt anyone, and the fear still shakes me, so hold me until it sleeps. As the end of the second post-chorus fades, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil raises its arms, the right one above Eve, who covers her breasts with her right arm and her groin with her left, thereby indicating the shame of nakedness, which, according to Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, both Adam and Eve experienced after they partook of the fruit. There is a dark medieval town in the background, and Hetfield's reflection, with the crucifix background from earlier in the video, appears in a mirror stained with incomprehensible writing. Adam then appears to the right of the tree of knowledge, wearing a loincloth and with his right arm signaling the tree trunk, which the serpent is coiled. Hetfield, crouching in the mirror's reflection, looks up and sings, "So tell me why you've chosen me," after which Eve is shown. She is swallowed by darkness, but dim yellow flashes of light reveal her to be holding the forbidden fruit, while the donkey-headed Satan stands behind her with his arms resting on her shoulders. The scene then changes to show both Adam and Eve, who were heretofore motionless, turning their heads and directing their gaze towards the tree as Eve reaches up to take the forbidden fruit. It is important to note that, like the other figures from Bosch's paintings in the video, with the exception of Jesus, who appears in its latter half, Adam and Eve are pale as death, signifying the state of death they are about to introduce into the world through sin. This is a very potent dramatization of the early verses of Genesis, without, of course, including the discourse between God and Adam from the text. In the scriptural passage, the devil, in the form of a serpent, tricks Eve into disobeying God's commandment against partaking of the fruit of the tree of knowledge by beguiling her with the promise that it will give her a certain kind of knowledge that will make her like God. That this knowledge relates to the passions, specifically sexual intimacy or lust, is picked up by biblical commentators such as Victor P. Hamilton, who point out that Adam and Eve's realization of their nakedness implies as much. But the way the forbidden fruit is itself described also points to the inducement of passionate desire at the behest of the devil's temptation. The fact that it looks good to eat, it's desirable, and after they partake of the fruit in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 to 7, their eyes are opened and they realize that they're naked. Eve and Adam are together culpable for this act of disobedience, since her husband was with her. The point is that the fruit was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. Desirability and pleasure are, as we have seen, motivating factors and goals in the cultivation of passionate attachment. But before one jumps to the presumption that here Scripture teaches against sexual intimacy, it is best to remember the interpretations of certain patristic writers like Gregory of Nazianzus, who affirmed that Adam and Eve would have been permitted this intimacy by God once they had become spiritually mature enough to not let their attachment to pleasure completely obscure their awareness of the presence of God or of one another. That they become selfish and prideful after being discovered by God in the garden is made clear when Adam accuses Eve of giving him the fruit instead of accepting the blame for his own actions. Here is the beginning of scapegoating, which is an outcome of unregulated passionate attachment to the objects of desire, and which Christ, as the new Adam, came to overturn with his obedience to God the Father in self-sacrificially and compassionately dying for all on the cross, through which he defeats death. Hetfield continues, "Don't want your grip, don't want your greed." And as he sings this verse, there is a close-up of the lead singer gripping his own throat and of Eve being gripped by Satan. The message is clear. Eve and the singer, as her spiritual descendant, is in the grip of Satan's greed, a greed manifested in the devil's temptation of Adam and Eve to satiate his jealousy, and of their own greed manifested in the desire for the apple. Hetfield then exclaims, "Don't want it," as a violent wind sweeps through the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve stand still as the latter holds and gazes at the apple, while Satan, in the grips of fear, runs past the screen in terror. God, who has not yet appeared in the music video, has nevertheless come to pass judgment on the scene. At this stage, Hetfield tears his singlet and defiantly sings, "I'll tear me open, make you gone. No more can you hurt anyone, and the fear still shakes me, so hold me until it sleeps." Ulrich, until now tortured by the red tree woman, and at this juncture it clearly makes sense that she is a manifestation of the tree of knowledge, stands courageously with his head held high, but as Hetfield reminds, fear still shakes him, and he still desires to be held. Friends, how are we going for time? All okay? I've got a couple more pages here, and I don't want to.
Got till 1:15. It'd be great to have time for some questions and discussion.
Okay, I'll try to get it done by 3-ish, and then if we break a 1:15, should be 50 minutes of that. Is that okay?
Perfect. Great.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I'll bring this back up. The next post-chorus begins with depictions of the Ecce Homo, showing Jesus wearing a crown of thorns, and held by Pilate and his coterie as the former is jeered at by the menacing crowd. The video then cuts to the tree in the garden and its branches falling as Eve sways and Adam recoils. They try to protect themselves from the rushing wind while Jesus continues to be mocked. Hetfield here becomes emphatic. It grips you, so hold me. It stains you, so hold me. It hates you, so hold me. It holds you until it sleeps. Here, the intensity of the passion of anger leading to violence is demonstrated by showing it directed against Jesus, whom we said above has properly oriented passions and is thus without sin. But nevertheless, the Christian testimony is that he truly suffered for the world via his passion. The intersection of the Genesis 2 to 3 scenes inspired by the Haywain triptych with Ecce Homo here is remarkable. This is because Adam's just suffering on account of his disobedience is a scriptural antitype of the unjust suffering of the obedient Son of Man, whom Jesus identifies himself as in the Gospels. Christ is therefore the new Adam, who is here voluntarily suffering the passion, the external blows leveled against him, as a consequence of the internal passions that Adam, the spiritual progenitor of humankind, succumbed to, thus unleashing sin and death upon the world. The sin now being committed against Jesus, and the death reflected in the pale faces of the aggressors. As the song's title repeats at the end of the post-chorus, the Prince of Hell from the third panel of Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights is shown surrounded by indifferent, pale-faced humans. Presumably they are all in hell as the prince devours demons, 2 of which dance at its feet. 3 more are shown dancing behind the writhing golden serpent, and the red tree woman returns to assail Ulrich once more, painting marks on his flesh as Hetfield is again shown seated on his thorny throne. This all occurs as Hammett's guitar solo, which is playing as these scenes flicker back and forth, reaches its crescendo as Hetfield implores, "I don't want it, I don't want it, no." The final chorus then enters into full swing with a heavier, faster tempo, showing the band neatly dressed and playing their instruments in the reflection of the stained mirror. "So tear me open, but beware, there's things inside without a care, and the dirt still stains me, so wash me till I'm clean." As they play, the jeering crowd begins to throw fruit at Jesus, and the video moves back and forth between the band playing the chorus to Jesus' suffering. As Hetfield sings the last verse of the chorus, "I'll tear me open to make you gone, no more can you hurt anyone," with the latter verse lengthened in the form of an entreaty, Jesus' feet are shown on the cross, with 2 hands caressing them. The video continues with, "And the fear still shakes me, so hold me until it sleeps," as the scenes oscillate between Jesus having fruit thrown at him, the band playing, and again to Jesus' feet. The video then ends with the band members back in their places of torment, the throne, the tree woman, etc., and Adam and Eve in a state of fallenness, various figures from Bosch's Ecce Homo, and finally the Virgin Mary weeping and caressing Jesus' feet. Over these images can be heard repeatedly and growing ever more faint until it sleeps. The scriptures, both the Old and New Testaments, explore the type-antitype relationship between Jesus Christ and many Old Testament figures, Abel, Isaac, Moses, etc. But the best example is that between Adam and Christ, insofar as Adam, considered in a multivalent manner as the first literal human being, the first to experience God directly or as symbolizing all human beings, is redeemed on all of these levels by Christ, the Son of Man and Son of God. It is because he is the latter that he has taken on flesh or humanity that Jesus, the new Adam, can succeed where the first Adam failed. If the first Adam failed by passionate disobedience, which introduced sin and death into the world, the latter succeeds through obedience to God the Father, even unto death via his passion. Entering willingly and self-sacrificially into the consequences of the first Adam's sin, the fallen state of the world leading to death, the new Adam cannot be held by death, but is victorious over it with his resurrection on the third day. Within this new Adam, therefore, and on account of his properly oriented will, death and sin have been annihilated. The Christian testimony is that while we still physically die at the end of our lives, this is of no consequence. For if we are in Christ while we are alive, we continue to live eternally with Christ in the next life. In other words, Christ's love for us and our love for him conquers death. There is additional symmetry between the wood of the tree of knowledge that vexed the first Adam and led him to passionate and sinful pride, and the wood of the tree of the cross of the new Adam that is the means through which he selflessly and lovingly conquers death. It is absolutely striking to find this imagery represented in Metallica's Until It Sleeps, especially in the final scenes of the video that splices the Bosch-inspired images of Adam and Eve in paradise and Jesus being mocked, together with an extension of the latter that shows Jesus fixed to the cross and his mother Mary, interpreted by the church as the new Eve for her obedience to God's will, weeping at his feet. Here, as we have seen, the passions that Hetfield sings about, that afflict him and that he desperately wishes to tear out of himself, are inaugurated by Adam and Eve in paradise at the temptation of the devil. But they are also inflicted upon Jesus during his own passion, as well as to his mother who agonizes for him. These passions therefore lead to a real experience of the demonic, of the oppressive and consuming hell that afflicts the band members and is magnified by the presence of hell's prince. What the video doesn't explicitly show, but merely hints at, is that the new Adam is the agent that overthrows the kingdom of the devil and the negative hold of the passions via his own willing passion and crucifixion. This is exemplified in his resurrection, which we don't see Until It Sleeps. Neither is it depicted explicitly in the Bosch paintings chosen by Bayer for the video. Thus, despite the striving of the band, especially its lead singer, to be released from the passions, the best they can do, and this is no small feat, is to go through this struggle and to arrive at the foot of the cross, where Jesus, the new Adam, has given up his life to overthrow evil and to reorient us towards God. His mother, the new Eve, weeps for him, experiencing her own passion in a sense. But Until It Sleeps closes this story with tragedy, making the entire narrative depicted therein a catastrophe, which is not the Christian testimony. On the other hand, the Christian story is, as J.R. Tolkien termed it, a eucatastrophe or evcatastrophe. For the protagonist of the story, the Son of God, Jesus, undoes everything shown so powerfully in the Until It Sleeps music video. The fall of Adam and Eve, the reign of the devil and his minions, and the torment visited upon humans as a consequence of the fall, with what comes next, his resurrection. So, let's see if I can just share. Yeah, okay. Now I can see you all again, I think. Hello, that's it.
Well, I give us Mario, can you hear us all right?
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Yeah, I think it's about 15 minutes for comments, questions, discussion. I know I've got at least one question, but I'll maybe hold back and let anyone else who's got a question. Okay, cheers. Yeah, it looks like Jonathan on Zoom. Feel free to unmute and fire away.
Thank you. My best friend is a big Metallica fan, so I was telling him what we've got today, and he was thinking this is great. I do have a question with regard to Hetfield. Has he actually made any not knowing the band a bit, but not having a great connection with them? Has he actually made any statements on what he believes about Christianity or about God in general?
Metallica are very clever at branding, and they have deliberately been for decades apolitical, and they don't comment publicly on their religious affiliations. But Hetfield did a couple of stints in rehab, and every time he came out and got a Christian tattoo, and his discourse, he refers quite often to God in his interviews and commentary. He's got the Sacred Heart tattooed to his arm, Jesus and the Sacred Heart. He's got biblical verses tattooed to his body. I'm convinced he's a Christian of some stripe, but he won't disclose it. And I think that's something that it's part of this industry that Metallica is. They don't talk about their beliefs. It's not surprising to find a lot of these guys who experienced fame early and who did a lot of damage to themselves personally, like Ozzy Osbourne ended up a Christian, Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, Alice Cooper. They're all Christians in the end. Thank God for that, you know? So, yeah, it's good.
Whereas Evanescence were Christian from the start.
They were at the beginning. Yeah, well, they're opening up for Metallica, Aiden, in a couple of weeks. So I'll tell you what they're like live.
Yeah, so cool.
It's cool, yeah.
Yeah. Any question in the room?
Thanks, mate. I just wonder if you could help me understand where would you locate this paper in theology? Like, what is the methodology at work here? And I guess, what's your implicit theology of culture that's working out in what you've done here?
That's so interesting. Thank you for that question, for both of the questions, actually. Look, if I'm honest, I think we're losing the culture war, right? So they were clever in the transition from late antiquity to Christendom, figures that Amy has been delving into recently, the Cappadocians and others, to engage with the prevailing culture, take the good and ignore the bad. And so my interest is to try to find Christianity everywhere where I think it might fit. And so this was an obvious example, given that the clip takes the music video takes imagery from a Catholic artist, a Renaissance artist, Hieronymus Bosch, and uses it, right? Yes. And they happen to me to be the biggest band on the planet. So I thought, well, you know, let's tease out what's implicit in that music video and communicate that to people while they're on their world tour, which is, you know, they're currently here. They're about to play in Adelaide. So that's my method is as simple as that, trying to witness to Jesus through these cultural products. I don't know if I'm successful, but I'll try. This is what I see when I see the video, when I watch the music video. So I'm just sharing that. And what was the other part of the question in terms of
yeah, I guess implicit theology of culture, but you kind of reach for that. I mean, in a way, so you're kind of doing a public theology in a way. I don't know if that word means 1,000 things to different people, but yeah, that's helpfully clarifying.
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of when I, for example, consume, to use capitalist terminology, a cultural product, I always interpret it through the lens of my own Christian experience. So I do that with Star Wars, I do it with Twin Peaks, I do it with Metallica, I do it with whatever it is that I'm kind of, you know, it just happens naturally. So this is just a elaboration of that in a more or less semi-scholarly way. I try to keep the paper, you know, more based on an interpretation of the video with scriptural allusions here and there.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Maybe following from that, would you see Metallica as kind of, I guess, more kind of individual, just sort of, you know, happenstance instance of this kind of popular band reaching for this explicit, you know, theological material, or are they themselves kind of potentially representative of a kind of spiritual condition of the Western world at this time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. Do you mean like the further you move away from God, the more you find him in the mud? Something like that?
Or just like, is this just like, just so happens Metallica on their own just happen to reach for this really explicit theological imagery that is you know, fodder for a seminar paper such as this? Or potentially, could you use them to kind of diagnose, I don't know, a latent, you know, interest in Christian faith, even within a quote unquote secular world? I don't know, something.
That's a really good. It does. That's a really good question. So I've always liked to interpret heavy metal. So that's one of my guilty pleasures. Okay, heavy metal music as the bottom half of a Renaissance painting. What these guys are doing with their imagery is they're utilizing provocative imagery, and they did it rather deliberately to upset parents in the 1980s, right? Because it's consonant with the heavy sort of music that they're playing. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all satanic. Some are, and they're stupid, but some are not. Some are just very clever. And when you deal with spiritual imagery, horror movie-like stuff, you're going to find God somewhere. inevitably. So Metallica, they dropped the kitsch very early, and they became very existential in terms of their motifs that they address. But Hetfield cannot escape himself, so his struggle with God is reflected in the lyrics and in the music. It's the same thing with bands like Iron Maiden. Half of them are Christian. No one knows because they don't talk about it. But if you look at the lyrics to some of their songs, you'd be shocked to find references to God, positive references to God. And these references anchor them into a long tradition of imagery, I would argue, that is epic and deployable, right? So it's on their album covers. It's, you know, Black Sabbath is another example. You know, Black Sabbath are often misinterpreted as very demonic. Indeed, they have songs which might look that way. They'll put little devils on their album covers. If you look at the lyrics, again, you'll be surprised. It's a very insightful criticism of worldly power, oppression and war being assimilated to pure evil. And in the end, as we saw with Ozzy, God rest his soul, he returned to church. He started going to church again. You know, so God has a way of bringing these creatives, I think, I'd like to think of bringing them back, and even of indirectly witnessing to him. Is that a good answer, Amy? I don't know if.
Well, yeah, and I mean, maybe if I'm hearing you right, I don't know, is the type of person that's attracted to, heavy metal or to being a heavy metal artist, like just more likely to have kind of a spiritual, I don't know what the word is.
Look,
Capacity,
it's deep stuff
or something like that. I don't know.
If I can just out half of my colleagues here at Notre Dame who listen to the same kind of music, and Bernard over there, I don't know about anyone else. I know that Bernard is going to Metallica in a couple of weeks as well. So whether we're spiritual, I don't want to talk about myself, but certainly I know spiritual people who are into metal, and it's like things that go together. High fantasy literature, heavy metal, theology. You'll find people who are into all three, you know.
I have two questions.
All right, yeah, Chris has got two questions here in the room.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi. Over here, I'm probably dressed as a rabbit or something in your screen.
You look like Rocket Raccoon, yeah.
Yeah. Hieronymus Bosch, fascinating guy. His paintings in the contemporary sense, though, were not as shocking or unusual. Well, he developed this fantastical style, but he was himself deeply conservative as a Catholic. In fact, he belonged to a semi-secret Catholic brotherhood in the local church. And the Garden of Earthly Delights, for example, passed through a couple of hands, but they were, including a Protestant who lost it when they got kicked out of Europe, but it ended up in the hands of an archly conservative Catholic monarch who ordered the Spanish Inquisition, for example, and hence it's ending up in the Madrid Museum, the Prado. Where incidentally I had a close intimate experience with the exact painting 10 years ago, so I've got a lovely personal connection. Over time, Hieronymus Bosch's work has become much more controversial than it was at the time. So that's I think an interesting perspective on metal embracing something which is radical, almost shocking today, but in its time wasn't.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Look, I think that Bosch, as well as you'll even find it in Giotto. What some of these pre-Renaissance and Renaissance artists are experimenting with is surrealism. You will find, for example, in Giotto, a scene of the mocking of Jesus, where there are disembodied hands striking him, but there's no body attached to them. The first thing I thought when I saw that, this is Lynchian. Like, this might as well have been conjured by a mid-20th century surrealist, but it's 700 years old, you know. So Bosch can fall within, I think, that period of transition to the Renaissance, which ends up in a kind of conservatism that's broken a bit by the Baroque. Thank you for those reflections. I love Bosch.
It's funny because while he's seen as a father of surrealism, in fact, his paintings at the time were seen almost as hyper-realism. So anyway, the second I'll take your question. It's a very quick one.
Yeah, very quick. We've got a few more. Go ahead.
You didn't really look at the structure of the song from musically, and I just think it's interesting that while it's a nice metal song, it's actually a 3-chord progression, that's taken from the very classic 4-chord song, if anybody's ever seen Axis of Awesom's song. It's basically a 4-5 minor 6 progression. That's very, very common. You see it in Fleetwood Mac's Rhiannon. You'll see it in Seasons Don't Fear the Reaper. All of those sorts of things.
Blue Oyster Cult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm not a musicologist, but that's very important to know. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Helen and Jack, I see you both have your hands up. I wonder if I could ask y'all to ask your questions in succession, and then Mario, if you're all right with maybe taking both on at once.
Sure, I'll do my best.
Helen, why don't you go first, and then Jackie.
Thank you. Quick question. You mentioned words like craving, desire, attachment. Those are very Buddhist concepts, and I just wondered if you know anything about whether Metallica or Hetfield or any of the band dabbled in Buddhism, or if you know anything about whether Buddhism might have influenced them.
It's a very good question. Look, I think that I had just one offhand comment, but I didn't read it because I wanted to get through the paper, that the fight against the passions is common to the mystical traditions of all major world religions. The problem that we have is the self. That's the main problem. They solve it in very different ways, but the passions is a problem. So that's a feature of Buddhism from the outset. No, I don't think that Hetfield is connected to Buddhism. Hammett might be because he has Southeast Asian provenance, but he's never made it clear that he's had any interest in religion. All of the lyrics are written by Hetfield predominantly, with Ulrich throwing a bone every now and again. Hetfield and Ulrich are the main songwriters. Ulrich has never shown any interest in religion. It's just James. And that's, again, he can't escape his Christianity. He just can't, which is good.
But when you say the problem with all is the self, I think that's a really key idea. Thank you.
I think so. No, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Jackie, last but not least, I'll let you get the last question.
Sure. And you might not be able to answer this, but considering, Unforgiven, Enter Sandman, Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Oh, yeah. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Yeah.
Holier than thou. Okay, so now I'm sure.
Another metalhead. This is fantastic.
I missed out on a ticket, but my son is going. Anyway.
Live vicariously through him.
The God that failed, Creeping Death. There's this, as a systematician, I'm looking for the strands that pull together. There's been like decades of them, writing in this kind of tenor. So what would you say, one or two themes that would be the key kind of spiritual Christian ones that have been decades been flown through, and you see it here in this latest song
with Metallica?
Yeah,
with Metallica. So thank you. That's a really good question. Conscience. There's something that stings James from time to time, and trauma. He suffers from trauma. The trauma of losing his mother and the trauma of losing Cliff. And he's been open about it. He's wept about it publicly. He puts on a tough exterior, but he's got a good heart, Hetfield, you can see. And so the categories that he uses to address it, what he's feeling and experiencing, have to do with hurt, pain, suffering, the desire, and that suffering leads to pleasure. And we know alcoholica is what they used to call them in the 80s, because they were just addicted to Jack Daniels, right? And so they went through the whole drug thing as well, like all the other big bands did back then. The scene has changed recently. So a lot of these newer bands, seeing what happened to the older bands, are staying clear from those kind of excesses, and they've been open about it. Bands who are successors in inverted commas to Metallica, like Trivium and various others. So I think having passed through all of that excess, which comes with the fame, in order to deal with the trauma, he's got guilt. He expresses that guilt through his music, the desire for forgiveness, and conscience. But if you look at him in recent interviews, he speaks almost like a kind of a new age guru with references to God constantly, James. We have our God-given talents and we need to use them, and thank God, keep saying thank God. If someone, no one has thought to ask him, are you a Christian, mate, or not? I think they don't want to offend him or something. But that's what I've noticed, Jackie.
Mario, thanks so much for joining us. I know it was your schedule early in the year was prohibitive of joining us on Wednesdays, so glad we got to sneak you in before the year ended, after your teaching duties were finished. So thanks again for taking time to share some of your
Thank
work
you
with us. Really grateful.
Thank you. I'm so happy. Yeah.